Hello, I'm Siu Challons-Lipton, and I'll be speaking to you at the 11th conference on the image. I wish I was in Sydney, Australia, but I'm not, so here I am with you virtually. So let me share my page with you. And here we go. Okay, so my presentation for this conference is Images, Visual Literacy, and Today's College Student. From petroglyphs on cave walls to pictures posted on Facebook walls, images are part of our world. Today's college students are referred to as the digital generation, even as visual experts, and that they prefer their graphics over their text. But are they visually literate, and to what degree? This paper offers a reconceptualization and measure of the value of visual literacy in learning for today's college student and their ability to recognize and understand meaning from images. UNESCO's definition of literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy involves a continuum of learning in enabling individuals to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and potential, and to participate fully in their community and wider society, end quote. It emphasizes print texts and doesn't include images, video, dance, or musical composition. Literacy has been the foundation of education through the areas of reading, writing, and speaking. But are these sufficient in a rapidly changing world and a future that is difficult to prepare for or to predict? Bringing creativity and literacy together can be a powerful tool. In 1935, Bauhaus artist Moholy Nagy stated that the illiterate of the future will be ignorant of pen and camera alike. Restated, the illiterate of the future will be ignorant of both text and image. Visual literacy damages a society as significantly as illiteracy of the written word. Today's college students represent the first generation who have been raised in an environment of graphic-driven technology. From birth, they have been exposed to an image-rich environment. Portable devices, graphic interfaces, and visual content are an integral part of their lifestyle of today's youth, the digital learners. Mark Prensky in Digital Natives, Digital Immigrants claims that today's average college grads have spent less than 5,000 hours of their lives reading, but over 10,000 playing video games. This is from his book, and then also in the book Cultural Literacy, Every American Needs to Know, Eric Hirsch offers his observation about American students that from the standpoint of their literacy and their ability to communicate with others in our culture, what they know is ephemeral and narrowly confined to their own generation, end quote. And also, quote, more and more of our young people don't know things we used to assume they knew. In this technological age, shared materials of literary culture have become more, not less important. Eva Brumberger echoed this sentiment when she stated that, quote, students who currently populate our classrooms do not possess a high degree of visual literacy. However, this is not entirely their fault. Most undergraduate curricula do little or nothing to enrich students' visual literacy. According to Anne Alejandro's book, Chapter, Like Happy Dreams, Integrating Visual Arts, Writing, and Reading, this ability to make meaning from an image, this interpretation, is an ability that all students develop, and they need to develop. She insists that, quote, students need to learn how to see, to interpret the canvas and the page, end quote. The National Assessment of Educational Progress has been tracking student performance on a variety of subjects in the 4th, 8th, and 12th grade nationally for more than 2 decades. 3 performance levels, basic, proficiency, and advanced, describe student skills. Assessments in 2010 for US history showed that 45% of students performed at or above the basic level, 12% performed at or above proficiency level, and about 1% performed at the advanced level. The performance is relatively unchanged from assessments conducted in 1994, 2001, and 2006. Once students enter college, most exposed to US history and art appreciation courses in their required general education curriculum. This should improve any deficits students may have in these subject areas. The question is whether and to what extent significant images associated with history, art, and culture are part of the educational experience at any level of education. So what is the image and cultural image literacy of today's college students? That's the question. Most institutions of higher education teach and assess verbal, quantitative, and information literacy. However, little attention is devoted to visual literacy. In a world in which entire industries can disappear overnight and highly trained workers are made redundant by new technology and outsources, visual literacy is not merely a helpful addition to a well-rounded curriculum. It is essential for employment in fields of the future, particularly in the world we're living in today. Many problems today are complex, shrouded in uncertain rules, and have surprising solutions, if solutions exist at all, and all of us are unaware of our future at this stage. This requires right brain, conceptual problem-solving abilities. Creativity is problem-solving, finding previously unrecognized connections. In Einstein words, creativity is seeing what everyone else has seen and thinking what no one else has thought. The term visual literacy is credited to John Debs, a co-founder of the International Visual Literacy Association. Debs offered an initial definition of the concept in the 1960s that visual literacy, quote, refers to a group of vision competencies in human being who can develop by seeing and at the same time having and integrating other sensory experiences. Avgerneau and Peterson conceded that a cohesive theory of visual literacy is in its infancy. Their conceptualization of visual literacy includes visual perception, visual language, visual learning, visual thinking, and visual communication. The Association of College and Research Libraries developed a set of visual literacy competency standards for higher education. They define visual literacy as a set of abilities that enables an individual to effectively find, interpret, evaluate, use, and create images and visual media. The introduction to these standards offers a rationale for the importance of visual literacy. The importance of images and visual media in contemporary culture is changing what it means to be literate in the 21st century. Today's society is highly visual, and visual imagery is no longer supplemental to other forms of information. New digital technologies have made it possible for almost anyone to create and share visual media. Yet the pervasiveness of images and visual media does not necessarily mean that individuals are able to critically view, use, and produce visual content. Individuals must develop these essential skills in order to engage capably in a visually oriented society. Visual literacy empowers individuals to participate fully in a visual culture. In contrast, art critic Robert Hughes suggested in 1984 that 99% of Americans are visually illiterate. In 1986, the Museum of Modern Art in New York distributed a visual literacy survey to 150 randomly selected visitors in an attempt to assess what they knew about modern art. The findings suggest that the majority of visitors were significantly better at citing the author of a work if given list of names from which to choose than if simply asked to identify the artists with no help. Further, they recognized only prominent artists' work and were not conversant in the language of art criticism or art history. These results are not surprising to museum educators, and they demonstrate the effects of the marginal role of art in our culture and educational system. This may explain why many in higher education passionately plead that it is time to more fully embrace visual literacy. They contend that the entire educational system needs to be revamped to emphasize the visual education from kindergarten to college. Visual literacy encompasses infographics, charts, symbols, tables, logos, drawings, photographs, and more. Visual literacy is much like cultural literacy in that some images are more well-known or prominent than others. Regardless of image prominence, one's understanding of the meaning of an image ranges from basic recognition to deep analysis and evaluation. This conceptualization of visual literacy is consistent with Bloom's taxonomy of learning. The taxonomy shows increasing sophisticated strata of engagement, recognizing, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So it is with visual literacy. One's visual literacy can be described as occurring on a continuum from basic literacy to sophisticated fluency within and across levels of learning or aesthetic development for each group of images, primary and secondary. Visual literacy requires a visual vocabulary that may be simple or sophisticated, literate or fluent. Progressing from basic visual literacy to sophisticated fluency is much like learning a language. One begins by learning sounds and then to basic grammar and vocabulary. At this point, the person may be considered literate or even functional in the language. As they continue to expand their vocabulary, hone their pronunciation, grasp colloquialisms, and master the rhythm and other nuances of the language, they may be considered proficient or even fluent. This analogy between language acquisition and image understanding is helpful to a point. The visual exists in a mode of both representation and communication that is independent of the verbal. Different processes are called upon when looking at the reading on a text or a page versus looking at images. Images have a more direct path to the emotions than text. Images can also be understood independent of the text intended to describe or explain their meaning. Images are also unique because of our ability to retain them even when exposed to them for very short periods of time. Roger Shepard explored recognition memory for words, sentences, and pictures. He presented 612 pairs of photographs with unlimited presentation time. Participants correctly recognized them with 99% accuracy. In what is perhaps the most extensive recognition memory test ever performed, Lionel Standing presented 10,000 pictures for 5 seconds each. 2 days later, participants correctly identified them in 8,300 or 10,000 pairs. When more and more pictures were presented, the retention percentage declined slightly, but the absolute number of pictures recognized increased. A recent MIT study found that participants performed better than chance when identifying images flashed for at least 13 milliseconds. The speed limit of the computer monitor they used. May Potter, an MIT professor of brain and cognitive sciences and senior author of the study, states, quote, "The fact that you can do that at these high speeds indicates that what vision does is find concepts, that what the brain is doing all day long, trying to understand what we're looking at." Rudolf Steiner's book, Intuitive Thinking as a Spiritual Path, claims that thoughts are conveyed or communicated as pictures. What this means is that when someone says tree, or we read the word tree, we picture the tree in our mind. Sometimes these images flash through our mind so quickly, we do not even realize that we have done this. Our mind works like a recording playing back events, thoughts, and reflections of the day. When we think about the past, present, or future, we picture it. When we think, we see. Research by Daniel Goldstein and Jared Gerinzinger explains that images may be broadly categorized as unrecognized or recognized. They describe an unrecognized image as one that has never been seen before. It is unfamiliar, its meaning is unknown. Recognition is presented as occurring at two levels. An image that is merely recognized is one that has been seen before, but for which no information is known beyond this initial sense of recognition. The second level is recognition beyond and along with additional information where one encounters it, what is called, and so on. The recognition of interest in this study is the second level. This level is essentially a correlation and identification of the image. With images, a person may recognize what the image is or what it represents, but at first glance, they may or may not appreciate its historical context and deeper meaning. Understanding the meaning of images does not always begin with recognition and proceed in some linear fashion. Instead, images may be evaluated and interpreted before and without being able to name them. This is a unique and important difference between visual literacy and verbal literacy. Educators have a special and urgent challenge to transform lazy looking into visual proficiency. Aristotle stated that without image, thinking is impossible. Leonardo da Vinci, in recognizing the impossibility of recording volumes of data, translated words into drawings. Students need to learn visually, and teachers need to learn to teach visually. Our history occurs in a visual and multidisciplinary world. Our record of that history is also increasingly visual. To teach that history without a healthy infusion of images is to present a picture that is far from fully developed. Ms. Saris contends that such images should be a part of basic courses of history and seems unassailable proposition. This literature suggests that using visual elements in teaching and learning yields positive results. In a much more pronounced way, kindergarten's show and tell needs to matriculate to the higher grades and even go to college. In A Visual Literacy in Teaching and Learning, Suzanne Stokes claims that visual enhancement should be used in teaching and visual skills should be promoted in combination with the development of verbal, reading, and mathematical skills. Using visuals in teaching results in a greater degree of learning. Stokes uses the example of the Italian conductor Toscanini, who during a rehearsal of Debussy's La Mer was unable to iterate the effect he wanted from a musical passage. After a moment's reflection, he threw a silk handkerchief into the air. The orchestra quietly watched the slow, graceful descent of the silk square and understood. Toscanini declared, "There, play it like that." Then they were able to achieve the effect Toscanini sought. In conclusion, technology, particularly the web, requires skills for reading and writing visually in order to derive meaning from what is being communicated. Educators have an urgent responsibility to transform and reverse this trend for college students. This is an increasingly visual world. Without the tools to understand images, society will be less literate. Thank you.